Last autumn, I decided to take a break and rented a cabin in the suburbs for a solo getaway. As a freelancer, I was always overwhelmed by my busy work schedule, so I wanted to take this opportunity to relax and escape the hustle and bustle of the city. The cabin was located in a relatively remote area, surrounded by dense woods, and about a 20-minute drive from the nearest town. The cabin owner was a kind elderly gentleman who told me I could call him anytime if I needed help. Driving along winding country roads, I finally saw the cabin and felt a surge of anticipation. The cabin's exterior was quaint and rustic, surrounded by tall pines, with the scent of earth and pine needles in the air. I carried my luggage inside and was greeted by a wave of warmth. It was a 2-story cabin with a fireplace, simply decorated but full of rustic charm. The first night went smoothly. Though the nighttime forest seemed a bit eerie, I still felt a sense of peace. The cabin's amenities were basic but comfortable. I made a simple dinner and went to bed early. In the middle of the night, I was awakened by a strange sound. It sounded like branches breaking outside. I told myself it was just the wind and went back to sleep. The next day, I decided to take a walk by the nearby lake to enjoy the natural scenery. The lake was stunningly beautiful, with clear water reflecting the surrounding trees. I sat on a rock by the shore, feeling the cool breeze on my face, but there was an inexplicable unease in my heart, as if something was watching me from the shadows. Back at the cabin, I tried to get some work done on my laptop but couldn't concentrate. I constantly felt like I was being watched. That night, I went to bed early again, but sleep didn't come easily. Around midnight, I heard the sound of branches snapping again, this time closer, seemingly right around the cabin. I got up, grabbed a flashlight, and shone it out the window, but saw nothing. My anxiety grew, and I decided to buy some self-defense tools in town the next day. As the night wore on and I tried to relax, I heard faint tapping sounds. It seemed to come from the walls of the cabin. My heart raced as I pressed my ear to the wall, realizing the sound was moving, like someone was walking around the cabin outside. I went to the window, carefully pulled back the curtain, and peered outside, but the night was pitch black and I couldn't see anything. Suddenly, a shadow flashed past the window and I jumped back, nearly falling. It was a human figure, I was sure of it. Fear surged through me, and I quickly closed the window, locking all the doors and windows, my palms sweaty. As I tried to calm down, I heard faint footsteps outside the door. They were very light, but in the stillness of the night, they were unnervingly clear. I covered my mouth, trying not to make a sound, and listened intently. The footsteps gradually faded away, and I finally relaxed a little. The third day, the weather turned gloomy, and the forest felt oppressive. I decided to go to town and buy some self-defense tools. On the way, I felt uneasy, always sensing eyes on my back. When I returned to the cabin, I checked everything and found some dirt smudges on the windowsill, as if someone had climbed up from outside. I tried to convince myself it was just some animal, but my unease grew. While tidying up the room, I noticed a note on the table. It read, "You shouldn't be here." The handwriting was scrawled, as if written in a hurry. My heart pounded as all sorts of possibilities flashed through my mind. Was someone really watching me? That night, I was even more cautious, checking all the doors and windows to make sure they were locked. In the middle of the night, I was awakened by a faint sound, like it came from the basement. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously went down to the basement. It was dark, but I could clearly see a small puddle in the corner with a few muddy footprints leading from it. The footprints were small, like those of an adult. I tried to stay calm and slowly approached the footprints, which led to a small basement window. The window was slightly open, and outside was the pitch-black forest. Suddenly, I realized that someone might have been watching me all this time, even coming and going from the cabin when I wasn't aware. I quickly ran back upstairs, locked all the doors and windows, and called the police. The police arrived quickly, but found nothing suspicious. They checked the cabin and the surrounding area, but found no evidence. They reassured me that the area was safe, but suggested I leave immediately and go somewhere safer. I packed my things and left the cabin that had once brought me peace. Although they didn't find the person lurking in the shadows, I knew this experience would stay with me forever, reminding me to always be vigilant. Back in the city, I often thought about that night in the forest, the feeling of being watched by invisible eyes still haunting me. Perhaps in those seemingly tranquil places, there were fears we couldn't imagine. This experience taught me that true terror doesn't always come from supernatural forces, but from the unknown and inexplicable aspects of human nature. Regardless, that solitary suburban vacation will always be one of the most unforgettable parts of my life. A few years ago, after ending a 3-year relationship, I was left physically and mentally exhausted from the stress of work and life. My friends suggested I take a vacation to unwind. After some consideration, I decided to go on a solo trip to a cabin in the countryside, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. I found a serene-looking cabin online, nestled deep in a dense forest, far from any crowds, just what I needed for a peaceful retreat. The booking process was smooth. The owner, an elderly gentleman, assured me through email that the cabin was very quiet and surrounded by beautiful scenery, making it an ideal vacation spot. I packed light and left the city, driving along the highway towards the countryside. The scenery gradually changed from skyscrapers to lush, green landscapes. Occasionally, I saw cows and sheep grazing in the fields. The further I drove from the city, the more relaxed I felt. By around 4 p.m., I finally arrived at the cabin. It was surrounded by towering trees, and I could hear the gentle flow of a nearby stream. The cabin looked quaint and rustic, giving off a sense of seclusion. I parked my car in the small clearing in front of the cabin, grabbed my luggage, and went inside. The interior was simple yet cozy. The living room had a comfortable sofa, a small coffee table, and a fireplace. The kitchen was well equipped for cooking. The bedroom, located on the second floor, had a large bed and a small bookshelf. The window offered a view of the endless green forest, which was breathtaking. I set down my luggage and took in the sight of my home for the next few days. Feeling more at ease, I decided to unpack and take a walk around the area. As night fell, the surroundings grew quiet. After dinner, I settled on the sofa with a book. The forest outside buzzed with the sounds of insects, creating an eerie silence. Just as I was about to go to bed, I heard faint footsteps outside. My heart raced as I got up to check. Through the window, I saw nothing but the rustling leaves in the wind. Telling myself it was probably just an animal, I double-checked the locks on the doors and windows before getting into bed. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to explore the area around the cabin. The fresh morning air and the sunlight filtering through the leaves were beautiful. However, as I walked to the back of the cabin, I noticed strange footprints on the ground, as if someone had been walking around recently. Uneasy, I brushed it off, convincing myself it must have been from previous guests. That evening, the temperature dropped, so I lit a fire in the fireplace. As night deepened, I heard the doorknob gently rattling, jolting me awake. My heart pounded as I imagined all sorts of potential dangers. I tried to call the police, but the remote location meant I had no cell signal. Panicking, I used the landline the cabin owner had provided. Although I got through, it would take at least an hour for the police to arrive. As I nervously waited, I suddenly heard tapping on the window. I went closer and saw a stranger staring at me, his eyes filled with malice. A wave of fear washed over me. The man tried to pry open the window, and I quickly locked all the doors and windows, searching for anything I could use to defend myself. Clutching a knife from the kitchen, my palms were sweaty and my heart raced. The man outside seemed to sense my defensive stance and became more aggressive, banging on the window harder. Just then, I heard footsteps outside the door. Was there more than one person? Peeking through the peephole, I saw another man trying to turn the doorknob forcefully. At this point, I knew I had to escape. Quietly, I opened the back door and slipped into the dark forest. The woods were pitch black, illuminated only by my faint flashlight. I moved as quietly as possible, trying not to draw attention. The wind and rustling leaves heightened my anxiety, making every sound seem like a threat. After what felt like an eternity, I saw lights ahead. It was a farmhouse. I ran to the door and knocked frantically. An elderly couple answered, and seeing my distressed state, they let me in and helped me call the police. The officers arrived shortly and escorted me back to the cabin. The police conducted a thorough search of the cabin, finding evidence of forced entry on the doors and windows, but no sign of the intruders. The cabin was in disarray, clearly indicating someone had tried to break in. Despite their search, the police couldn't identify or locate the perpetrators due to the cabin's isolated location and lack of witnesses. As the police were leaving, one of the officers pulled me aside. "We found this near the back door," he said, handing me a small, blood-stained cloth. "It's not from any of your belongings. Stay alert and report anything unusual." I was taken back home, but I couldn't shake the unease. Every night, those malicious eyes and the strangers' faces haunted me, making it hard to sleep. I even started to worry if they were still out there, watching, waiting for another chance. That vacation changed me completely. I swore never to go on a solo trip to the countryside again. Even though the police suggested it might have been a regular break-in attempt, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. Days turned into weeks, and I gradually resumed my normal life, but the shadow of that experience lingered. I installed more security measures at home, including surveillance cameras and an alarm system. Yet every night, I still felt a tinge of fear, worried that the men might come back. This ordeal taught me a crucial lesson. No matter where you are, always stay vigilant. Even in the seemingly tranquil countryside, danger can lurk. I hope my experience serves as a warning to others to protect themselves and avoid similar terrifying encounters. A few years ago in autumn, my friends and I, who ran a small independent film production company, were preparing for a thriller film set in a lakeside cabin. To scout locations and gather material, we decided to visit a lake area rumored to have stunning scenery, perfect for our shoot. We heard about a cabin on the lakeside that seemed ideal, so we decided to check it out. After a few hours of driving, we finally arrived at the lakeside cabin. Stepping out of the car, I took a deep breath of the crisp, damp autumn air. The cabin stood silently by the lake, surrounded by golden leaves. The lake's surface shimmered like a giant mirror, reflecting the blue sky and white clouds. Despite its age, the cabin's exterior was well preserved. We unpacked our belongings and entered the cabin. The interior was simple yet charmingly rustic, with old photos on the walls and thick rugs on the floor. We planned to stay for a few days, conduct our site survey, and shoot some preliminary footage. On the first day, we decided to explore the area to get a feel for the surroundings. The lakeside scenery was breathtaking. The leaves sparkled in the sunlight. We walked along the shore, taking plenty of photos and videos. Everyone agreed that this location was perfect for our film, and we excitedly discussed our ideas. In the evening, we returned to the cabin, lit a campfire, and gathered around it to chat. The lakeside was eerily quiet at night, with only the crackling of the fire and the occasional call of night birds breaking the silence. We drank beer and planned the next few days' activities. The next morning, I decided to explore further on my own, hoping to find other interesting spots for our film. I walked along the lake for a while, feeling relaxed by the tranquil water and the surrounding stillness. Suddenly, I noticed a hidden trail by the lakeside, overgrown with weeds and seemingly seldom used. Driven by curiosity, I followed the trail. It became narrower and the trees denser as I went along. After about an hour, I reached a clearing and found an abandoned cabin. The cabin looked like it hadn't been inhabited for years, with moss and vines covering its walls and open windows and doors. Despite my unease, I decided to take a closer look. Approaching the cabin, I pushed open the half-open door and found old furniture and debris scattered around. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and rotting wood. I carefully explored each room, finding them filled with dust and decay. In one room, I noticed a door with a shiny silver padlock, starkly out of place in the otherwise decrepit cabin. My curiosity piqued. I wondered what could be behind the locked door. I tried pushing the door, but it didn't budge. I searched the cabin for any tools to open the padlock, but found nothing. At that moment, a sense of unease washed over me, as if something unseen was watching me. I decided to leave and return to our rented cabin. On the way back, I had the unsettling feeling that I was being followed. I heard faint footsteps behind me, but every time I turned around, I saw nothing. The shadows of the trees grew longer in the setting sun, making the woods feel even more ominous. Back at our cabin, I told my friends about my discovery. Although they found it strange, they didn't think much of it. We continued discussing our film plans, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me. As night fell, we lit a campfire outside the cabin, hoping for a pleasant evening. However, the night was anything but relaxing. In the dead of night, I heard the footsteps again, much closer this time. Despite our efforts to stay calm, the sensation of being watched made it impossible to sleep. We took turns keeping watch, praying for the night to pass quickly. In the middle of the night, I heard a faint knocking at the door. Nervously, I walked to the door and peered through the crack, but saw nothing. Returning to bed, I found it impossible to sleep, feeling the oppressive weight of the darkness outside. At dawn, we decided to cut our trip short and leave. The previous night's experience was too unsettling for anyone to want to stay. We packed our things quickly and drove away from the lakeside cabin. Although we never found out who followed us or what lay behind that locked door, the experience left a lasting mark on us. Back in the city, we resumed our work on the film, but I couldn't shake the memory of our time at the lakeside cabin. The unanswered questions and the lurking sense of danger haunted me. I couldn't stop wondering what secrets the abandoned cabin held. To this day, whenever I think about that experience, a chill runs down my spine. I don't know the intentions of whoever followed us that night, nor the story behind the locked door. But I do know that the feeling of being watched and followed will forever be etched in my memory, a scar that will never fully heal.